Hello everyone, this is Christy Pratt, and today's training we're going to be going over why somebody would look at an IUL, Index Universal Life, versus another long-term saving strategy. So I wanted to show you a comparison between some of the typical choices for long-term savings and then show you what most of you know about an IUL and do a quick comparison. So what you see in front of you here is a scenario that's assuming mutual funds, 401ks, Roths that are accompanied with a term life insurance. Okay, so we're doing this on a 40-year-old who will be retiring after 30 years, and this individual in each scenario is all the same, will be putting in $500 a month total. Okay, they will also, in the scenarios listed below with the mutual funds, 401k, and Roth, be covered by a $250,000 30-year term, which costs them $30 a month. So that's wrapped up in the investment. So protection first, and then the saving strategy after. All right, so what we're doing here is we're going to assume the rate of return on all scenario listed below is 7.5%. And that's pre-retirement. And then after retirement, that's reduced down to 5.5% gross. Okay, that is on all of those with the exception of the IUL. Because as you know, or maybe you didn't, but when you are at retirement age, it's not a good idea to take on a lot of risk. And so if you have an age appropriate savings plan, it's going to include less risk. So with less risk, you have less reward. So your interest isn't going to be as high as it was in the pre-retirement ages when you can take on more risk. Okay, so that's just smart, but that's why we're showing that example. Anyway, so this is really going to just show you a comparison to some of the common options for long-term savings, and it's going to assume that in these years I have listed here, years 1, 10, 20, and 30, that if they were to pull out their money here, this is what they could get. So hopefully that makes sense. If you look at it long enough and if you follow along, I think it will. So if you look at year one for the mutual fund types of long-term savings, we're going to assume you're paying taxes each year because these types of products are taxed on the interest earned every single year. So you get a statement, you pay tax on the earnings, okay? It's also going to assume taxes of 25% on the gains each year and a 1% management fee. All right. In the 401k, we're going to assume a 25% tax plus a 10% before 59.5 penalty on any withdrawals and a 1% management fee. Okay, and on the Roth, we're also going to assume a 25% tax plus 10% on interest withdrawal before the 59.5. And the reason that we're doing that on both the 401k and the Roth is because they do have a 10% penalty if they withdraw money prior to the qualified age of 59.5. And then, of course, on a Roth, no taxes beyond that, and then a 1% management fee. Now, an IUL, what we're assuming here is the withdrawal of all surrender value, so pretty much cashing out everything in your cash value, but at least keeping the policy alive. You have to have at least $1 in that policy so that it doesn't lapse. And I'm not saying $1 wouldn't make it lapse, but I'm just saying in this scenario, just knowing that you're keeping enough money in there to keep the policy alive. So let's take a look then at year one. So mutual fund types on year one, assuming that they're putting in $500 a month, so 40-year that's going to retire in 30 years. So at year one, you can see how much money you have based on these stipulations up here. Okay, so 57.67, 37.77. When we don't have the tax, this is obviously an after tax, we have 57.51, and the IUL. Now you can see the IUL is pretty low, and why is that? Because the cost of insurance is a little bit higher than that. Okay, so year 10, assuming again the 7.5% gross return on your your rate of return, you've got 72,000 here in the mutual fund type. On the 401k, you've got 79 gross, and if you take into account the penalty if they were to withdraw some money that year, 10% penalty, 25% tax, they would be a net at 51,447. My light just went down a little bit. Let me fix it. I don't know why I just did that. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, and then for the Roth, we have the same amount of gross, but of course the difference here is the net's not going to include the taxes. And then the IUL, you can see the growth there. Again, assuming the same rate of return. 20 years, we've got 190 in this type. We've got 230 in the 401k. It's more of a benefit to have tax deferred. You get a better tax benefit there. Now, if you look at it minus the tax, you get a 172. The Roth is going to be the same thing. Not the same though when it comes to taxes, because of course this is a post-tax contribution. And then in the IUL, 222. So as far as the gross is concerned, because the cost of insurance is a bit different, we're still under the other choices. If you look at year 30, you see here in this type, you have 382,000 and change. In the 401k, you have 519, that's on the gross, and 389 and change on the net. Same thing for the Roth, but of course, there's no difference there because of the tax benefits in the Roth. And then the IUL, 536. Now, I've said in many different trainings, and you know this if you look at illustrations, that the longer the IULs are working for you, building and compounding interest with the guarantees that they have, and despite the caps, after about 15, 20 years, they become very, very, very good. And I mean, almost unbeatable in the scenarios that we're talking about. So that's when you really have to understand as you're talking to your clients that this is a long-term strategy, one that can be very, very good after a number of years. Okay, so if we look at that, that's a pocket view of these years. Well, let's look at then how does it all work out? Okay, so why are we looking at this? Why would we even look at an IUL? So this is going to then assume that at age 70 to age 100, so 30 years of retirement money coming to this individual, this is what you would get for the mutual fund types of accounts. Okay, so I'm not being very specific here because I'm just trying to be very, very general in the types. Okay, so you know what types here, but I'm not going to speak to that, but it's just so you understand the way that it's functioning. You have $20,000 and change a year after a 25% tax. Okay, so that's what you're going to get. 401k, you're going to get a little bit more because based on your tax deferral and other things, you've got 31,000, and that's a gross, and then 23 after you pay a 25% tax. Now Roth is going to be the same, and yet you've grown that interest without having to pay tax after that post-tax. So it's going to be, the gross and the net is going to be the same of 31. Now, if you look here, there's two different options. In the blue, for the IUL, you've got 41,000 and change, and that's on a fixed loan. Fixed loan means at that time, in an IUL policy, it's usually a wash loan. So whatever interest is gained, that's the interest that's charged as well. So it's just a wash. But you get, if you take out a loan, then you don't have to pay tax on that loan, okay, if you do it the right way. Now, on the variable loan, you can see that you actually get a little bit more. And that's based on the arbitrage, right, with the 5% max loan charged. So the interest that you're gaining at 7.5 in this scenario with a 5% max loan charge, that's the amount that you could pull out each year. So you can see it's a pretty significant difference. So if you look at this and summarized at the bottom here is why would an IUL be a better choice for some people? Now, I'm not suggesting that you're taking people out of any choice. I'm just saying if somebody's looking at it and they want to know how it compares to other things, right? So on this side of the equation, we have, risk of loss due to market performance. You have all the good and all the bad that comes along with it. You don't have insurance beyond 30 years in this scenario because we did a 30-year term. And there's no ability to do smart banking, or I'm just going to refer to this variable loan option as to smart banking. You can't do that with these other types of scenarios over here. With an IUL, of course, you don't have any risk of loss due to market performance because you have guarantees, right? You have market-based returns without any market risk. You have insurance coverage, protection first, it's still intact after 30 years. And this one is assuming you do an option B and then you switch it over to an option A. And if you don't know what that means, if you haven't been trained on that, then go back and look at the trainings we did not too long ago where it was going from B to A. What are the options B and A? Okay. So, and another thing is, and you can see as with this example, is that you are being penalized for taking money out early in some of these plans, these qualified plans here. Whereas over here, if you do a loan in this policy, you don't have a penalty. It's more liquid than some of the other options. You have guarantees, or what we call the floor, where you can't lose money, and you also sometimes have a guarantee that has a value to it. And then, of course, these loan options really do make this smart banking with these variable loans available to people who are doing this. So it becomes a workable product throughout all of your years and into retirement. One of the big things that I like to point out to people is this right here, where in these scenarios here, you can take risk when you're younger, but you have to reallocate your risk so that you have more safety when you're in retirement. If you had this scenario, same thing, before pre-retirement as you build it up and contribute and accumulate, and then into retirement where you are then using that money, you don't have to change any risk because there is no risk as far as that's concerned with the guarantees and the floor. So really, I want you to take into consideration all of that and then think about it for a minute. Would you yourself like to have an IUL? Is that a scenario that you could see that would fit into your life? Okay, so think about that when you're also working with your clients. Now, it's not for everybody. This was just a very general example, but hopefully that helped you understand why you can, or how you can stack up an IUL versus other strategies for long-term savings. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.